Happy Tuesday, everybody. It's been a bit. Oh, Lord. All right, so we'll give folks a few minutes to get in here before we dive into the topic. What can we talk about? So Saturday, right? I didn't have a video. I did 13 hours of driving Saturday. It's not purely driving, but because I gotta charge the old electric vehicle. It takes a little extra time than your standard gas powered vehicles, but yeah, I was on the road for 13 hours, and I forgot, like, when you're on the road that long, how despite the fact that you're kind of doing nothing, it is exhausting, right? Just because you're driving, you're constantly paying attention to stuff, and you're stuck in your chair the whole time. It's a little rough on the old human being. But needless to say, the family friend who was in trouble, for those who saw those posts, got her settled with some family, so she's going to be all right. And that's what matters, right? Kind of made a post detailing that, but basically the short update is she's with family. She's going to be okay. We'll keep in contact with her, of course. And there's a few other things that she has to progress with to kind of close everything out, I guess is the best way to put it, or start the next chapter in her life, maybe more accurate. And, my household will be there to help her what we can. Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. We should be back to the return, and I will dive into topic now, and I want to preface this with something. For those that might have watched, the Aquarium Co-op put out a video about canister filters. In fact, let me get a link as a reference, because I feel like that's appropriate. If you haven't seen this, and most of you probably have, if you're fans of the co-op, you've definitely seen it, right? But we'll put it in chat just in case. I watched this video earlier today. This is from the co-op about canister filters, and I understood some points, and I was not necessarily a fan of some other points. And thus, this topic was born. Now, chat, I will warn you. I might go. I'm gonna bring my volume just a touch, because I might get a little excited. And that, yeah. I haven't seen it yet. No spoilers, please. Yeah, that ain't happening, buddy. Johnny, I love you, my friend, but that ain't happening. Spoilers are coming. It is well known that, like, Cory does not like canister filters. And I get that. Cory looks at it from a perspective very frequently of, partially in cost analysis, canister filters are very expensive, where a sponge filter, extremely cheap. Two, from the perspective of his business, he has a branded sponge filter. He doesn't have a powered filter of any form, really. And while he might have in the past carried some from brands like Fluval and the little, like, teeny tiny Zoom Med one he had for a while, he doesn't have his canister filter because he's not a big canister filter guy. He also looks at it from the perspective of a fish ring. And he talks in the video about the breeders he knows, like Master Breeder Dean, who really very seldomly use canister filters except on certain tanks. And he uses this description, I forget it word for word. I probably should have rewatched right before this, but he uses this description like, just to mess around with them. Bull. This is where the rant will begin. I understand that from a business perspective, it is almost in your favor to be a big fan of the thing you sell. However, for a number of aquarium hobbyists, especially people who are into aquascaping, sponge filters are freaking ugly. They look terrible. And when I had to add the sponge filter to this thing, you guys noticed it like that. And it's in the background, and it's a little green tube and air bubbles. It's not even the focus. It's not like we were focusing on the tank in the setup, but y'all noticed it like that. They're an eyesore. Similarly, when you put a sponge on the intake of even a canister filter or a hang on the back, it's an eyesore. For a number of people in this hobby, aesthetics are more important than function, right? I'm a function over form person. But if I'm trying to make a tank look nice, I want to minimize the amount of visible equipment in my tank. So that's where something like a canister filter or a sump, they perform a similar thing, just sumps are more customizable. Sumps are like super ultra mega canister filters. At least that's like the equivalency I put in my brain, right? Because internet dum-dum needs it dumbed down, right? So I think when you leave out this like really critical perspective as to why people would consider a canister filter, it irks me a lot. Because if we're going to talk about all the positives of sponge filtration or even hang on the backs, you have to include the appropriate positives of the thing you're dogging on. Even if you're dogging on it because you don't like it, you need to be balanced in your assessment. And the thing that killed me about that video is the bias slants so hard that it's like, we're only going to list negatives. We're never going to list positives. And I was sitting here watching this video. Like, I watched it during effectively a small break, and I was just kind of doing this the whole time. Just kind of frustrated. Now, do I think you need a canister filter? No. Very rarely do people need a canister filter. But do they serve an important purpose for a number of people? Yes. Another point that gets made is that very frequently people run into all sorts of problems with canister filters. And one of the assertions, and maybe assertion is too strong a word, but one of the statements is effectively that, like, oh, they're difficult to understand and people make mistakes. That's on you, seller of the product. If you're not properly informing your customer, I'm sorry, you can't blame the piece of equipment because the setup is not correct. Like, even someone like me, who will set up a canister filter and leave their tubes too long, F-Zone Fancy Boy, we did that video recently, right? And so it causes some problems. Okay, but I own the fact that that is my fault, because otherwise the rest of the setup is correct. It's literally just my tubes are too freaking long. And I know better. I've been doing this long enough. But if you're harping on that this is a negative of the product because a new aquarist is not going to know how to prevent it from leaking or maintenance it, or all the there are several examples that he used. No. That is on a lot of places, but not the piece of equipment. Okay, if a person doesn't read the manual on how to set it up, sure, you can blame the person. But realistically, when you're selling someone a canister filter, you might ask them, is this for a new tank? Have you used a canister filter before? You own a store, man. Come on. Like, blaming the equipment is one of the... Oh. Hold on. I don't want to blow my mic apart. Okay. Some of the analogies that were made about cars. Yeah, I'm a car guy. So, when you're making these analogies, I inherently am going to zero in on them really tight. Cory loves his analogies. And I don't blame him. You're trying to put things in simpler terminology to make it easy to understand. However, a canister filter is not a sports car. A canister filter is more like an SUV. It has way more room and a bunch of power. It's not sleek and faster and designed to do the thing as quickly as possible. As quickly as possible will be the hang-on back and the cartridge system. That would be your sports car. Fast, flashy. Those replacement cartridges, they're a flashy thing. Cleaning and maintaining a canister filter is not a sports car. It's not a Ferrari, for sake. These things drive me nuts. And yet, his 800-gallon, powered by canister filters. His giant 1450 that's going to be in the new shop once it's done, powered by FX6s. You can make sumps perfectly silent if you know what you're doing. He knows the right people. He even probably knows how to do it correctly. Why canister filters over a sump? Sumps are faster to maintain. They have significantly larger water capability, significantly larger media capability. Why? There's a similar level of risk of leaks or other problems in a canister filter to a sump if it is installed correctly. So why? And I might burn a bridge by doing this, but it drove me crazy. And the only reason it drives me crazy is because the analysis was so slanted. If you at least spoke on the positives, I get that Cory doesn't like canisters. I get it. There are several times where I don't like canisters, mostly when it comes to how much space they take up and the maintenance. But canisters have their purpose. And let me give you okay, so before the whole thing with my family friend, I visited a local club member. And I picked up something cool you guys are going to get to see very soon. Once I have to go get a hand truck that can heft a fairly heavy. I need basically an appliance dolly for those who are familiar, to move some things around in my fish room. Something really awesome is going to go into the warm room that you guys are used to. Anyway, I was at this gentleman's house and he had this beautiful full ADA setup. 2 ADA Superjet 1200s. The ADA, like, CO2 reactor. I mean, this guy's setup was incredible. Beautiful tank. I have, like, a teeny tiny short video on my phone, and I will show you guys that of this tank when I kind of unveil what I got from him. Okay? Beautiful. And this is one of the other things where some canister filters are extremely aesthetically pleasing, or are designed in a way that they can be hidden away for high levels of beautiful display with minimal equipment inside the tank. Think like the Awaze. the Awaze biotherms allow you to hide your heater inside the filter. It's similar for sumps. You can hide your equipment so there's minimal stuff in the tank, so the focus is just the fish and the plants, or if you're saltwater, coral and the fish, whatever, right? Canister filters serve one of two purposes. Either minimizing the amount of equipment in the tank for especially your like high aquascapes, very pretty tanks. Think about anything you see on Green Aqua, right? They use a canister filter on everything, glassware, or sometimes stainless steel. It depends on the look they're going for, right? But these are designed for being more form over function. We're going for the beauty aesthetic. Or two, they just have higher water flow from a more powerful pump and more media capacity for giving yourself the ability to handle large aquariums. Think like your 125s, your 240s, anything bigger than that. Now, what I will say, the one thing that I agreed with wholeheartedly in all of Cory's videos. So if you're watching Cory, please, for all the negatives I've gone with, listen to this part too. I love the concept of having a filter. This might be difficult to figure out, but having a filter explain the volume of waste it can handle as opposed to relying 100% on the gallons per hour the pump can do. He said so something like, can handle that, this can handle 4 ounces of food per day or whatever. Basically, finding a metric that tells us the bioload capacity, or maybe just the effective bioload that this can handle without a problem, right? I think that's actually a smart idea. That would be a great way to evolve the way that we look at filtration. And I think that's a good idea. And that was the one part when he brought up that I was just like, that's smart. I don't know how you do it correctly, but that's smart. All those other things though, man, I was heated. I was sitting here. I know at one point I literally gnashed my teeth together. I was so frustrated with certain statements. And I will happily say that to his face. I think I have talked a little bit about canister filters with Cory in person. Granted, I think I've only seen Cory in person twice in the last 4 years. So it's not like I see him that often. But there's my rant. Maybe not the rant that people would have thought. I'm not necessarily pro or negative canisters. I think, and Greg Jones says this perfectly, canister filters serve a very niche purpose. Large tanks with no room for a sump. Problem is, big brands spend big money trying to sell them to people who don't necessarily need them, and they're not scalable. Well, I think they are kind of scalable in a certain sense. The problem is they're hard to scale way down. It's hard to get a canister filter for a 20-gallon aquarium because often they probably have way too powerful a pump. But they scale up fairly well because very frequently we don't need crazy levels of flow in our aquariums. We just need to move enough water and we need to provide enough oxygen. So often if you're doing things correctly, the raw gallon per hour flow of a pump doesn't matter as much as the oxygen saturation capability that you're doing in however you do your aquarium. And, one of the ways that this is most effective in super big tanks that use sumps is because they'll often have a weir, and the weir causes extra surface agitation, right? It causes that circular drain effect, kind of similar to what you see when you flush a toilet or you watch water go down the drain in any sense. It causes that circular effect, which creates more gas exchange, right? It's more movement of the water, creates gas exchange, etc. And then there's just other things that you can do in a sump system to heavily saturate it with oxygen, which is extremely helpful for your aquariums, right? For your fish, fighting algae in certain cases is having high levels of oxygen is really good for that. But yeah, I agree. I think that's a relatively good statement. There's probably part of it that's I might want to append. The scalability is more it's hard to scale them down. it's easier to scale them up. And their cost can be prohibitive. That's the biggest thing with it. I think that, okay, one more thing that Cory did very well is the talk about budget, right? If somebody has like only a certain amount of budget and they're going to spend, you know, if they're going to spend $300 on a tank and your canister filter is going to cost you $120, well, that money's probably better spent doing significantly less power in your filtration and moving that money elsewhere, right? You could probably find a small hang-on back or use sponges and save yourself a bunch of money and use that money toward a light or just more plants to start, more fish, whatever that may be, right? I agree with that point as well. But the lambasting of a canister filter only for its negatives and never looking at its positives when you're only looking at the positives of the other filtration, I have some qualms with that. And rather than making a video where I'm just like losing my brains in a recorded format, I thought it would be more fun to engage you lovely folks this evening in the stream. So now, we'll open the floor to question and answers. And I'm going to dig through comments a little bit just to kind of catch up because I've been in my own little bubble for a while. Leo209 says, I prefer the Fluval 407 to the CJ Whale over the FX6. And the CJ Whale, excuse me, over the FX6, but that's my preference. Sure, I can understand that. Like, for the FX6 is enormous, and it has big pieces of tubing that go into your tank, where you probably, on a majority of your tanks, don't need that giant bucket as your filter, right? I think there are plenty of reasons not to need an FX6. I just happen to have FX6s on a bunch of my big tanks, and they work really well for me. Plus, you can abuse those things so much, and they just refuse to die, which I kind of respect because I get very busy, and sometimes certain filters do not get the amount of love they need, and that's my fault. It's not the fault of the filter, that's my fault. But that's why I pick a filter that I can abuse quite a lot with. I think maybe neglect is more the right word. Neglect rather than abuse. Maybe they're the same. I don't know, but yeah. And you got people like Ginger Graves who does not like canister filters. It specifically says that like fluvals are hard to open, and that I can understand. A Fluval FX6 is a bear to open. That F-Zone Fancy Boy, those latches when you're putting them down, they need some oomph to get them in place. I would not suggest them to someone that has like arthritis or carpal tunnel. If you have any issues in your hands, I would never suggest that filter to you. I would suggest something far different. A lot of canister filters, where like the Oase, I think actually its system is really smart. So for people that have those kind of issues, you might look at something, although it's crazy expensive. I think they're too expensive for their own good. The Oases, right? They're much more simplistic in how you service them and interact with them, especially with their pre-filters, right? Nathan Hovey says nothing to do with filters. Would, could, Amaryl Rasboras, CPDs, and Neon Tetras go after male endlers? My males are dying. I find one every few days. I would believe the Neon Tetras over the various Rasboras and or the CPDs. They used to be called Galaxy Rasboras at one point, which is why I have a Rasbora in my head. And mostly because certain Tetras can be fin nippy, and if you start nipping on fins on an Endler, it's a lot of stress, and they can very easily succumb to a number of problems very quickly, or just not be able to swim properly anymore and die because they can't eat. But it depends on what you're seeing in the Endlers. Like, I would be trying to examine their bodies after you get them out of the tank, because if the finnage is in fine condition, I don't know that that's the problem. It might just be that the particular Endlers are having some trouble with the water parameters, because Endlers, a lot like your other live bearers, tend to like harder water, where a lot of your like CPDs and Rasboras and Tetras like softer water. So if your water is too soft or your pH is a little too acidic, that might be really tough on those Endlers. That would be what I would look at. You might also consider temperature. If you're running too cold, potentially, because like most of the Endlers and live bearers nowadays, they really like to be kept quite warm, unless you're keeping some really specific like Gideids and some of those kind of fish. Johnny at Dan's Fish. I assumed he slapped a co-op logo on a Sun, and that was the reason for the video. No, I would not. We'd have a very different discussion. Leo, Wetspot has a Fahaka puffer for $19.99 and Colente West African cribs. Oh no. You've gone so deep down the puffer rabbit hole, man. Yeah, be careful. Fahakas get big. Big boys. Not quite Maboo big, but they get big, and they need big tanks. You're talking like at least a 240 to keep them safely at their adult size. You need a big tank for a Fahaka. They get big. Ginger Graves, personally, I want a Sump. I think it would be easier to deal with. I agree. I just haven't tried to set one up. I like the Iwase canister filter because the pre-filter. Yeah. So, pre-said almost exactly what I said, but I read your thing about fluvols first in trying to catch up in chat, Ginger. So, we're on the same wavelength. I like Sumps. I just don't have a lot of tanks that are set up to properly utilize a Sump. That'll change eventually. I'll have tanks with Sumps, and that'll be fun. But right now, no. Eventually, though, I look forward to it. Sumps are sweet. Paul Soltero. Paul, I might have to talk to you soon, by the way. Which I think you're going to Clash, aren't you? Are you driving up to Clash? Because if so, I'll just talk to you there. I watched Cory's, and it made me think that the manufacturers of canisters stole his lunch money. Well, I mean, he used to sell all the Fluval stuff for a long time. So he aqua clears, and he carried Fluval canisters for a long time in the store, right? But I totally understand, like, from his perspective, and to be fair, I want to be really clear here. From his perspective, especially somebody who's setting up a fish room with lots of multiple tanks, canisters are a nightmare for a setup like that. Because there's so many tanks, you'd have so many canisters, you'd need to do so much service, plus it's really inefficient cost-wise compared to like a linear piston pump for air and a bunch of sponges. Or even Matten filters, right? Like when I set up, whenever I can get my garage like properly emptied and do the fish room I want to do, I'm not putting hang-on backs and canister filters on everything. I'm running it almost all on air, except for like the primary display tanks I'm going to use. And in those, I'm pretty confident I'm going to do sumps on every single one. And then I'll have a few tanks specifically for like the testing lab that I've always wanted to do, where like some canister filters or hang-on backs and those kind of things can be used for our testing purposes, right? So we can do proper side-by-sides, really good, rigorous test work. That's the dream. It's the dream. But, like, I get that. I get if you're setting up a big fish room, like, you don't want 30 canister filters for 30 tanks. That's a nightmare. You don't even want that many hang-on backs. I know some people that do it, quite a few more hang-on backs because of, like, they're a specialist in something that needs a certain level of flow, or maybe it's not as easy to get a like central air system in the space they're in. I've seen that, and that's okay. I get that. But, you know, canisters are a little overkill if you're doing it that route. And that's what Cory's usually doing, right? And Cory thinks a lot of things around fish rooms. So I get where you're like, you'd have this insane slant. It's not really insane, but you'd have this strong slant toward air-driven filtration. Sponges in particular are his jam, and coarser sponges are really his jam. But man, you can't like say that thing is bad, only describe negatives and never look at the positives, and then look at the other thing and only look at the positives and never look at their negatives. Like, just we're all right. Trevor Prescott, I grew up servicing pools. That's an interesting, like, early job. So a canister filter was a natural choice for me. Totally niche, but hey. But yeah, you're used to that, right? You're used to those types of filtration for pools. And in even, like, you know, proper sand filters, which most of us have never encountered a proper sand filter like you would see in a pool, where, Trevor, you're going to have all the experience with those things, you used to service them, right? And you would understand like why they work, how they work, and where you could even potentially use them in something like an aquarium as opposed to necessarily a pool. Is it the most efficient thing? Because usually they kind of have to be pretty big. Probably not, but can you do it? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Trying to catch up. I know I missed some stuff. Kingfisher Sketch. Do I see a live stream debating what filter type to what vehicle? Maybe a little taco time with bourbon to keep it lighthearted. That would be kind of fun. What's the sponge filter, a Pinto? Bob Purcell. No, sponge filters aren't Pintos, man. They're to me, like, the sponge filter is a Honda. If you take care of it, or a Toyota, if you take care of it, it will last you forever, and it's reliable. Is it flashy? No. Is it gonna, like, house everything under the sun? No. But does it do its job? If you set it up correctly and you take care of it, absolutely. Right? Canister filters are like a delivery van or an SUV, right? They hold a ton of stuff. They're kind of big. They're kind of chunky. They're not necessarily the easiest to work on or to get moving around, right? You know, think about like SUVs, like a big turning radiuses, or it's like parking a boat, right? I felt like the sports car analogy was just bad. But maybe that's because I went to a car show on Sunday, so I was around a lot of beautiful classic cars. It was really nice. Despite doing 13 hours driving on Saturday, I drove an hour to a car show. But it was because I wanted to see some classics. So beautiful. Oh, totally off topic, I know, but we talked cars, and this is what happens. My brain's all over the place. So a beautiful 57 Corvette. Red with like kind of the cream white, not like the pure white, but that slightly off, more cream color white for its accents. Just beautiful car. Beautiful restoration work. Every part of that car was gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And I probably spent a good like 10 minutes just staring at that thing. It's just like, it's a really nice car. Very nice. And then when I was done, I got in my stupid electric and drove away. Amazon pancakes. Not every aquarist with big fish has the ability to drill tempered glass. That's where canisters come in handy. Yeah, well, you shouldn't drill tempered glass. Tempered glass, if you try to drill, it's going to explode, almost guaranteed, unless it's done with really, really specific tools. And you really know what you're doing. But yeah. And realistically, you probably, if you're going to do that, you probably want acrylic. So it's way easier to set up. Cliff Andrews using an FX6, yes, or FX5, yes, 5 for filtration and CO2 injection and water movement for years. Clean it maybe once a year. Haven't had to replace any media. It works for me. Oh, aquarium runs off solar. I need to see pictures of this, Cliff. Like, I'm assuming you have solar panels outside that run power internally, or maybe you're like solar panels on your roof. So a majority of your power in your house is solar. If you're doing it just the aquarium, though, I got to see how that's rigged up. I'm going to, in chat, for you especially, Cliff Andrews, if you can, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. I'm going to put my email in the chat just in case. Please, please, please. If you can show me pictures or explain your system and how it's set up, I'd love to hear that, because that just sounds awesome and up my alley. Because you're mixing tech and like a little bit of green energy, which I find interesting, with aquarium keeping. And that is just like, well, you have me like a kid in a candy store. Atkins Nature Aquariums. My reef tank is on a sump, and soon setting up another sump for my cichlids. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. All right, I'm going to try and play some catch up. I know I'm probably way behind on the chat. Let me see here. Sid Miller, sticking with the car analogy, to me a canister is an F-150. Yes, they're good, but 90% of people who get them don't need that capacity. That's actually a really good one. I mean, I feel like the same about SUVs. Like most people who buy an SUV don't actually need them, and rarely actually use an SUV and or a truck to the full level of what you actually need them. You'd probably be better off with like, you know, a slightly larger sedan or even maybe like a minivan, right? But in the U.S., we love our trucks. Greg Jones, clarification on scalable being scalable as in you can't afford 10 of them when building a fish room. Okay, sure, yeah. Cost scalability. Absolutely agree with that. They're totally not scalable. DJ Guppy Bish, my largest tanks use under gravel filters. That's old school, man. I've actually been pondering whether I would use sponges, matins, or under gravel filters whenever I do my garage. I'm tempted to do under gravel filters because it's like super old school and kind of fun, but also can be difficult to catch fish. So depends on what you're going for, right? And I guess certain fry, which because I do rainbows, that could be its own struggle with under gravel filters. So you could have too much agitation at the surface, and that's bad for rainbow fish fry, but there's ways around it. Liquid Zoo Only Fins. I always laugh at your name. I can't help it. If you have a lot of tanks, sponge filters are 100% a good option, or just air-driven filtration in general, right? We can lump in a few other things that aren't necessarily a sponge. Because like 30 plus tanks or 50 plus sponge filters all co-op running on central air. Yeah, sure. Sponge filters can be ugly. Absolutely. That's all about how you escape the tank. Yes, it's just it can be very difficult to truly hide a sponge filter. You'll always see something. It's tough. Alec Kumanoff used an Eheim in the 70s and liked it. Don't like flue vols. Would use a trickle filter over a sump. Less juice and no overflow needed. Sure. I can understand doing trickle filters. Can understand doing that. I mean, it's like overhead sumps, right? Trickle filters are kind of like a sump. Just different, slightly different application. Similar mentality. Stephen P. Aquarium. Hey, buddy, how you doing? The 300 and 400 series flue canisters require gorilla strength to break the seal too. Yeah, they can be tough, man. They can be tough. I like the Awazes a lot. I just hate how like, and this is Ryan Too Many Fishberg is like, agree, Awaze is too pricey, but I love mine too. I like the Awazes a lot. I think several parts of their design are really smart. I think there are areas to improve on them. But man, I just hate the cost. They're so expensive, dude. I had a lot of issues with my FX6 clogging faster than my CJ Whale 500 and 407. Really? Wow. I don't know. I swear I could just set up an FX6 in ways that it shouldn't be okay, and it will just like handle things forever and not get clogged up. But maybe I'm just inherently setting them up in a way that is to their advantage. I'll admit that that's a possibility. I've done some weird things. I feel like I'm missing some context. Oh, I've seen 125 is good for them. I mean, yes, you can keep Fahaka in a 125, but if you want to give them like the long term, what is best for them, you really want to look at like a 180 or 240. 180 just being slightly deeper than a 125, right, front to back, because it's the 2 foot front to back as opposed to the 18 inches. But you know, 125s will do it. I don't know. I like having more room when I can. Paul, I've got the 30-gallon water box aquarium that I'm thinking about putting a canister for as far as filtration. Do you think a Fluval 307 or was a Biomaster? I think it depends on the level of service you want to do. If you want the service to be easier on you and like, 10 minutes once a week or something like that, I think the Awaze is the go-to because that pre-filter really does make it so you almost never need to service the rest of the canister. You just service the pre-filter and call it a day. You could do that for probably way longer than you would with almost any other filter. It'd be fine. If you care more about like flow from the pump, the Fluval, because Awazes do have less overall flow rate. But I think if you want your maintenance to be less of a bear, the Awaze is a better system. You do pay more, which kind of sucks, but you pay for the perks, right? It's got several of good things going for it that other filters really just haven't like even remotely touched yet. And you're going to pay for that engineering, right? You could also just get like an Eheim. It's basically just a giant cylinder where you can do anything in it. John Ebson, are you going to Fishtoberfest this year? So I go to the Clash the week before, and I've taken some time off around that, which thankfully my work was like totally chill. Like, yeah, you got a pre-planned vacation? Sure. Don't worry about it. Enjoy. I know I'm going to go to Fishtoberfest like at least one day. What I might do is like come down Friday night, stay Friday night, be there Saturday, and then head home later Saturday night. I haven't figured out what I'm gonna do. I'll be there for at least a day, but I'm not gonna have a table, and I'm not speaking. They did at one point contact me about speaking potentially, but because that was while I was unemployed, I wasn't sure like what my new job was going to be. I was already committed to the Clash. I wasn't really sure like how my new job at the time where I didn't know what was going on would handle me basically going like, oh yeah, by the way, I need like a week and a half worth of time completely off in September randomly. You cool with that? Without having, PTO built up or something like that, where thankfully the company I work for is one of those companies that does like the unlimited PTO thing. I put that in big quotation marks because it's, it's within reason, right? They don't track your PTO hours. Really. They're just like, as long as you're not gone too much and your boss approves it, we kind of don't care. And if you're getting your job done, it's fine, which is nice, but also at the same time, very often when you have the unlimited PTO, people take less time off. So it's a thing. Zen Ginger, I still use my undergravel filters for my betas when I need low flow tank. They're great, but def make me feel old. That's part of the reason why I like them. I'm interested in lower flow for like rainbow fish babies. So that's why I've been pondering when I go back to trying to like breed is having underground filtration. My only worry is that if I don't dial the air in like perfectly on them, I might have too much surface agitation from the air and not necessarily flow underneath. And that could be difficult for like the first month that rainbows are babies, right? They don't do well with high agitation in the water. Although that being said, I had a rainbow fish baby grow up in Fallen Forest and it had like, giant canister of death on it. So maybe they'll find the quiet part and just chill there. Nathan Hovey, thank you so much for some input. They are intact, so I'm leaning towards temp. I'm moving the Rasboras and Neons. We'll get the heater back in the tank, see if that helps. Yeah. No, happy to help, man. Happy to help. Lumpy Dog, what's up, buddy? I loaded up on Seahawks in fantasy football. I'll be a hero or a heel. Dude, man, there is a potential that the Seahawks offense is like bonkers good this year. I really enjoyed watching Jackson Smith and Jigba, JSN, in the preseason games. Like, yes, he had a kind of a minor injury that required surgery, but he's basically already back. You already have like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who are phenomenal. As long as our running backs can stay healthy, we'll have a pretty dangerous offense. The question is just, will they be fantasy worthy? That's the problem. Like, I think Tyler Lockett's always a good like wide receiver 2 or 3 in fantasy because he's perpetually had about 1,000 yards and several touchdowns every year. But it's not necessarily say like Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson or in the like your big marquee receivers, but good in your like extra receiver slot to get reliable points. I like it though. I respect it. My fantasy football team is interesting. I have 2 different ones. I'm in one with a bunch of other fish creators from the like Kenny E and Chattanooga Ed and some of them, and I missed the draft because that was the day I was driving. So I auto drafted, and my team is either really good or really bad. There's no middle ground. It's either going to be really good or it's going to be terrible. We'll see though. Oh. Alex Kumanoff, or Alec, not Alex. Jeez, that shows you where my brain's at. I can't even read English. For patient bowheads, Dave's rare aquarium fish just put up M. bosemani Aves Creek at $9 a piece, and Kalitawa at $14 each, and they ship to Canada. Wow, that's cheap. Wow, that's cheap. Especially if the Kalitawa at $14 are between an inch and a half. I mean, the fish doesn't get much more than about 3 inches total. That is so cheap. Oh, you can't tell me those things. I don't have a tank ready yet. Oh, man. Oh, man. Jim Fiore, did you get a chance to look into the Aquarium substrate? No, last week, like, blew my entire, like, aquarium thing just out of the water. I barely got service done on some of my tanks, just because I was so focused on helping family friend be okay, be safe, get some support. Basically, if I wasn't taking care of work or my wife, I was helping that person out. So, yeah, a great example, just because as I mentioned in my post, it's a standard policy that in the case of a domestic dispute, right, whether it's truly domestic violence or whatever, especially if protective orders are in place, which there was in this case, it's policy to have the police escort you to get your things. So we had to wait. I remember this. We had to park like a block and a half away from her former living place and wait 45 minutes for the police to arrive. And then when they did arrive, they brought 4 cops in 4 different cars, one being a canine unit. They don't mess around, man. They do not mess around. And they just had to like clear the house, make sure that the ex wasn't there, which he wasn't. And I felt really bad for the other member of the home, the ex's father, just because it's stress, right? It's stressful. You want this to be simple. He and I were coordinating, trying to make everything civil and easy on everybody so that nobody got hurt or there wasn't any bad situations to happen, right? We're just trying to make this amicable and civil and all that kind of stuff. And it was just the amount of stress on that poor guy. I feel really bad for him because, it's absolutely not his fault. He's just housing people and having to go through that. I can't imagine that kind of stress, but it was a little wild. After a while, we finally get the clear to go in, and the officer who's in charge is like, hey, how long do you think you're going to take? And, she guesstimated this amount of time, and he was like, cool, do you feel safe here if we leave? Which is basically saying, like, we've got an assurance that the person under order is not coming back. Do you feel safe? If not, we'll leave an officer here, no matter how long it takes. And it's like, but we can't like have all of us here the entire time. And we're like, no, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Thank you for doing what you need to do. You know, you guys have important stuff to do. Thank you. Right. So it was a little wild. Zen Ginger, maybe you could point the UGF outputs toward the walls and create a big airline tubing ring in the center for the rainbow fry. That's actually a good idea. That's a good idea. I like where your head's at. Zen Ginger, thank you. Thank you. Pond Groover over UK, who pimps out filters, has a man crush on Awaze canisters. I mean, I get it. You can do a lot to them, and that pre-filter is awesome, but I think they're overcosted. But yeah. Yeah. Did I actually catch up to chat? Geez, that must mean I missed something in the middle. If I missed a question, like, feel free to repost it. And if you guys have questions, again, at Bentley Pasco makes it easy to see. All that kind of good stuff. Leo 209, when I get the bigger tank, I'll blame you. Got bit by the puffer bug. Hey, man, puffers have a lot of character. They're like some of your big cichlids. They just have so much character that I totally understand why people get into them. I like some of the little ones. I'm not quite as like crazy as like Preston John, but I would totally be interested in having like a cross river puffer just because they're so cool looking. But I don't know that I can afford that bad boy. Ooh. I'll send you some sleepers. Nabokov fan. Hey man, I'll take advice. Stephen P. Yeah, the job I left in June was unlimited PTO. I barely took PTO, but guess how much PTO back pay I got when I left? Absolutely zero. That's part of the other reason why companies will do unlimited PTO is they don't have to cash you out. You know, I'm kind of lucky. I can work remote, so as long as I have a reasonable internet connection and a laptop, I could, in theory, work anywhere. But why do that when I can stay home? Although it does mean that it's more possible, in theory, for me to travel for like conventions, because then I can, in theory, work a little bit remotely and make things work, but the big problem is like travel costs for me just gets a little rough. It's expensive. It's expensive to travel, man. I was looking at potentially going to, is it NEC? The one that Greg Jones is in charge of, which Greg, if you're still in chat, hi, I got your email. But you know, it's like, that's where I'm looking at, like, if I probably can only do like a travel convention a year just because of cost. Because again, I'm the only income in my house, right? You know, my wife's disabled, so it's purely on me. So I only have so much money, and I purposely run my YouTube channel like a dum-dum and not in a way that's designed to make money off of it. So there's that too. Oh boy. Oh boy. But, and then I spend my money when I do go to things on like stuff to give away. Because I'm crazy. And that's how I roll. Okay. Jim, the Aquarium substrate seems like it's packed so hard that it feels like tiny plastic balls. I asked because it looks and feels like it wouldn't have to take water. I wouldn't have to take water and fish out. So the water won't get scummy. Oh, I see. So like adding it, just rinse it. Usually that scum is just dust. And if you just give it a good rinse, you won't have to worry about that. That's usually what's happening is it's just some of the dust from that stuff. L fish tank's going to watch about 20 ELs appear in GH. I feel like I'm missing something in the next 2 months. Oh, I see. Nabokov fan, it was noticed that the comment on the vid from this morning was 6 months old. Seems weird. Felt really bad watching the video. Like I was getting scolded for not having them. Like sponge filters, you mean? Sorry. I think I missed something in there, but yeah. Amazon Pancakes. When are you going to set up your discus tank? Is that directed to me? Because I'll be honest with you. The only discus that interests me are wild discus. And I would almost rather just set up another rainbow fish tank. Because rainbows have a certain behavior. Or there is a species of angelfish I would want to keep other than my Leopoldi. Which, speaking of, we're close to time, but I want to talk about this. So I was talking with brother-in-law James, right? Because he's, now that we're going to have some alterations to the fish room, so he's going to get to escape an entire 40 breeder. So we're going to have another one that my wife's going to aquascape. Kind of like how she did Fallen Forest. She's going to be in charge of a lot of the hardscape, but she's also got the idea of what she wants it to look like and some of the plants she wants. So I'm doing even less of the plant selection, which I think that tank will look really cool. And I think you guys are really going to like it because it's going to be a little more crazy than we previously planned. But I'm fine with that. And then brother-in-law James is going to get to escape an entire 40-gallon breeder tank. And what he wants to do, we saw in my Leopoldi Angels, and we've been able to identify the one male-female pair that is in there that because they spawned. So the eggs didn't make it. There's too much competition on that tank right now. But what he wants to do is he wants to separate the other angels out of that tank and make an aquascape for angelfish. So that we can then kind of reformat the tank the pair is in to give them an opportunity to like more seriously breed in that tank and potentially get some baby Leopoldis. So cool, right? That's what brother-in-law James wants to do. So I've kind of committed like, yeah, we'll do that project. So he's going to escape a full 40-gallon breeder sometime soon. I got to get my like the rest of my world back on track and get some work done in the fish room here soon. Too many things went south altogether in a close period of time between me getting a new job, going crazy, like back to the full work cadence and trying to do that stuff. Family friend, all those kind of things, kind of like just hurled my timetables out the window. That's a very loud siren. I hope you can't hear it, but you probably can. So yeah, that'll be fun. We'll have angel tanks coming soon. Oh man, Leo's saving up for the crossover puffer. Good luck, buddy. They're pricey. Oh, Jim. Do you know the species of rainbow that Petco and PetSmart call Australian rainbow fish? So, here's the problem. A lot of times they're actually hybrids because they're grown in big farms, and those big farms have had typically are in Florida and have had problems with high water marks and fish crossing over between their ponds. But most commonly, they're hold on, gotta remember my species here. Problem is I get so deep on certain ones that I forget I think it's just Australis, but because they're not any of like the really cool ones like a Fluviatilis or any of that stuff. That's what I'm looking at. Hold on. I'm actually trying to look this up. Oh, that's not the right one. I love how everything wants to call them all Fluviatilis, but that's totally not the most common of the Australian rainbows. It's just like the Western rainbow. Yeah, Australis. They're almost always some form of Australis, or Splendida, if I remember right. Yeah, Splendida is another really common one in your Australian bows, which is so like there's the Western Australian rainbow fish, most commonly is the Australis. And then there's the eastern, I know their common name is better, Australian rainbow fish, which is most commonly the Splendida. This is how you can tell, like, I don't pay enough attention to, like, the Australian rainbows outside of, like, 3 or 4. Oh, man. But yeah, almost always, they typically are some kind of hybrid, or they're Splendidas, and there are some, like, the Blah Australis that have, like, crossbred with Splendidas, and they're almost always those. Almost always those. Cross River Buffer Fund. Thanks, Leo. That'll take a lot more than that, man. those bad boys are pricey, but they're so cool looking. I really want to see, like, someone have success, because it's just, so many people struggle to successfully keep them. But yeah, Splendidas can get really big. Mike, good to see you, buddy. Mike, are you going to the Keystone Clash? Because you're out kind of in that direction. I don't know if that's too far a drive, but if you are, dude, we gotta hang out. We gotta babble like we did at Triple Crown. Johnny, why you do this to me? Johnny Dancefish. Bentley, have you seen short-bodied rainbows? Yes. And your thoughts? Why? Why would you ruin something so beautiful? Why would you impact this gorgeous fish that can have a significantly longer lifespan than so many of our more common, peaceful, colorful fish, by breeding in a effectively defective gene that shortens their lifespan, messes with their color, and really, like, makes them look blah. Just blah. Like some of, like, your teacup platies and some of your balloon type platies, I kind of get the appeal. It's very commonly in, like, the Hong Kong markets and stuff like that, but you're talking about genes that inherently ruin the fish's life. And I can't get on them, man. Yeah, and some people like them because they look, like, weird and cute, but man, I just can't do it. Can't do it. Yeah. I know someone trying to breed them, hoping it happens. The Cross River Puffers? Man, good luck. That's tough. Chris Ladd, I'll be at Keystone Clash. First time. I'm excited. It's going to be my first time to Keystone Clash, too. I'm super excited. It'll be interesting to be out in not far from Philly, an area I've just never been to. And more importantly, kind of a giant nerd convention with mostly YouTube speakers. So that's kind of weird, right? PetSmart's website says it's Melanitania fluviatilis for the record. Yeah, but they almost always look more like Splendidas than fluviatilises. That's the problem, right? That's how you know they're probably a hybrid. But yeah, I think I went to a PetSmart and they labeled them as fluviatilis, and I sat there staring at them for a while and was like, that's not a fluviatilis. That's huh. It's something in the color. Something in the color tells me it's not a proper fluviatilis. But hey, some kind of generic Australian rainbow fish. Tony Adams, when is Keystone Clash? I live outside Philly. It's the 22nd through the 24th. I know that I fly in on the 21st. And then because I'm not taking, I'm not trying to take fish home. I'm not really staying for the auction on the 24th. Yeah, 22nd through the 24th of September. Not that far away. I need to, like, finish my presentations. I got to finish my slide decks, as we like to call them, for my talks. Guy was on the Amazonas magazine for puffers, huh? Nice, 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 nice. Amazon Pancakes Bentley. Have you seen the Weo substrate and hardscape materials? Absolutely amazing looking kit. I have not. I'll look into them though. I'll look into it. Oh, I want to make sure I didn't miss something. Okay, EL. Gonna be my last one for the night. It's time for me to leave as we are past time. Do you have a favorite stand for either a 75 gallon or 40 breeder? So if you're looking for like individual stands, I think for the 40 breeder, it depends on the aesthetic you want. If you want something that's more of a closed off cabinet, those are always really expensive. And then at that case, you're probably looking at something that's like the ones designed to go with some of the Aquarium tanks. And I don't even necessarily think they're my favorite. They don't look that great. The black ones are okay. I like those, what do they call them, like the Brooklyn or whatever that Petco carries. They're the metal ones that are kind of open, but they're really reasonably well built. Just you'll see your equipment, right? So it depends on whether you're trying to hide stuff or not. For the most part, I tend to use like racking systems or build wooden stands. Because I don't necessarily care about that appearance so much. I'm not trying to like make a like ADA gallery out of my stands. I want the tank to look nice, and then I want the stand to be functional. So, I look at like built stands a little bit more. There's lots of like easy to build wood stands that are incredibly sturdy, and you just paint them black. Yeah, maybe it's the Imaginatarium one now, Michael Eustace. Let me actually look it up. Real quickly. Speed. Yeah, Imaginatarium Brooklyn is the design that they carry that I like. There's also their wood like Winston cabinet or whatever. Just don't go with like if you look at like your Petcos and stuff, the aquatic fundamentals or whatever, those things are terrible. That design is just bad. But the Brooklyn style ones, which are just kind of like square metal stands, they're fairly well built. You assemble them yourself, and they're not terribly expensive. You can get them on sale and stuff like that, and save yourself some money. But yeah, like even Trevor Prescott is saying, you can do some stuff with like magnets and curtains to hide your equipment really quickly because they're metal. It's pretty easy peasy. Zen Ginger, 2 more months to a year. Nice. Mary Beth, the Danger Noodle. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, gang. I really want to thank everybody for being here and participating in my rant about canister filters. I've had a great conversation about why people do and don't like canister filters. Look at other options like sumps and underground filtration, right? We've talked about a lot of different stuff tonight. I really appreciate everybody participating. For the replay crew, in the comments down below, let me know. What are your thoughts? Do you think I'm way off base in my rant about canister filters and I'm wrong? I want to hear you. Or maybe you agree with me. And that if we're going to assess something with some kind of analytical approach, we need to look at both the positive and negative of all things that we're assessing. Not just the negatives of the thing we don't like and the positives of the thing we do like. As always, gang, thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay awesome. Have a good night.